All right, everybody, welcome back to yet another episode of All of the Avengers. I realize I haven't been diligent in introducing these shows. I'm always wanting to just get right into them. But this is part of the White Rocket Entertainment Network. And of course, you can join in the fun, go to and be part of the family that supports our little venture here, trying to read every issue of the Avengers by going to patreon.com and just looking for White Rocket Reviews and sign up there. I believe there's also we also have an All of the Avengers Patreon just for this show. So either one gets to White Rocket Entertainment. We would appreciate it. Keep the show going. Now, I'm going to make shorter work, I think, of these two issues. Again, we're in this period now where the Avengers, I've noted over the last 30, 35 issues prior to this that there'll be some single issue stories, and there'll be other formats, other variations on story structure. But the one that has struck me the most is where there'll be almost like the old Batman 1960s Batman TV show, where the first issue of a story, of a two-part story, the first issue sets up the problem and ends with a cliffhanger, and usually with the Avengers defeated and captured, right? And the second issue is their comeback and their defeat of the villain, which is interesting, by the way, that in Jim Shooter's first story that he does for the Avengers, when I actually started reading as a kid, 158, 159 is the beginning of the Shooter run. It's exactly the same thing, right? In 158, they go and fight Graviton and get captured, and in 159, they escape and defeat Graviton. So they've been doing that from almost the very beginning in the Avengers, all the way back in the 1960s. So that's what we have again this time. We're into the Roy Thomas written era now, though Don Heck is still doing the art, I believe. We'll see that on the next page. But I don't have as much to say about this story. This is kind of an oddball. This is almost this harkens back to some of the earliest Avengers stories where just random aliens, or something would fight them. It seems like eventually the Avengers get to where every antagonist, every menace, every villain that they fight is like a name brand, like, oh, it's Ultron, and then it's Kang, and then it's, Nefaria, and then it's, whoever. It's like a name. But this is another one of those where it's just sort of some aliens, which is kind of odd. The other thing that's interesting, I think, about this particular story is it's I'm enjoying seeing where later writers get inspired, and find inspiration for their story from the history of the Avengers. Certainly Kurt Busiek made no secret that he went back and reread particularly the Steve Englehart issues to kind of inform his run, although he told some friends and I at dinner one time that he was aiming for Englehart but kind of getting Shooter, which I think is true and probably accurate and fair, which made me happy. But for this one, like I said, it does kind of hark back to the earliest stories when the Avengers just fought random aliens and monsters, kind of like the Fantastic Four did. And it and there was something I was going to say, but it's going to I'll come back to it in a second. So let's go ahead and dig on into this one. I know what I was going to say, and it where it provides inspiration for later stories. This is the first time, to my knowledge, that Wanda and Pietro go to Europe on a quest involving their heritage and end up having to call the Avengers for help. But it's not the last time, right? I mean, in the, I want to say the 180s maybe of the Avengers, something similar happens involved. It's called the Yesterday Quest or something. So this is not going to be the last time that happens. All right. So it's a pretty neat cover. I like minimal intrusions on the cover. Several things of note here. all you've got is the title, the Ultroids attack, and then you got a pretty good group shot of at least some of the Avengers. There's no Wanda, there's no Pietro. You do have the Black Widow in her really underwhelming early costume there. At least it's not purple with the little pointy mask, but it's still, at least they figured out that the Black Widow probably ought to have a somewhat dark costume. So I give them credit for that. You have an only marginally bigger than normal Goliath throwing a piece of machinery at somebody. Captain America looks pretty cool there, throwing his shield. Hawkeye brandishing his bow and arrow, and the Wasp kind of swan diving, it looks like, but she's swooping around there too. So we have 4 Avengers plus, at that time, guest star Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow, which that her status is addressed in either this issue or the next one. I guess in this one, yeah. So let's go ahead. This is issue 36, still 12 cents back then. Yeah, Wanda and Pietro are up in the corner box. They're just not on the cover. All right, the Ultroids attack. I have to admit, when I saw this title, I was like, the Ultroids, that name sounds familiar, but I don't have a specific memory. And sure enough, I did not know this crowd. I'm sure I read this comic, decades ago in a hurry, and I remembered absolutely nothing about it. So we suspected at the end of last issue that the person that was addressing Steve from off camera, Steve Rogers from off camera, might be either Pietro or Wanda. And sure enough, it is Wanda, apparently. So the Ultroids attack. And again, I'm going to zip right along because a lot of this issue and the next issue is just combat, which is not terribly original or exciting the way it's done. I'm looking for things of note, things worth discussing and analyzing, and we're going to hit those as we go along. I'll note that this was still edited by Stan Lee, but scripted by Roy Thomas. Don Heck drawing it, Sam Rosen lettering it. I guess Don Heck must have inked himself, and there's no word on the coloring still. I'm going to keep harping on that. I do like that shot of Wanda there. That's about as modern of a look for Wanda as we've seen. She still has the little straps for the swimsuit part of her costume, but I think her cape looks really good there. Her hair and her tiara looks really good. That's a very nice shot of Wanda, I think. So she comes in to tell Cap that they need help, and she gives us a flashback that she and Pietro were in Eastern Europe. I'm trying to see if it tells us exactly where, what country, but in the Balkans. Okay, so in southeastern Europe, in the Balkan Peninsula, that would be just above Greece, like Bulgaria, Romania, Albania, that area. So a flying saucer comes by. Pietro impetuously decides to go and check it out. He goes inside and gets captured. Wanda is afraid that, she's unable to open the saucer with her power, and she's worried she'll get captured and then nobody can rescue her brother. So she says, I'm going to go and get the Avengers. And of course, that's where the story ends, and she's telling it to Steve. Hawkeye comes up with the Black Widow, and they're going to go about to eat a pizza. I like that. When Hawkeye suggests that the Black Widow should gain membership. And what I think is really interesting here is that the big objection, the person who objects to Black Widow becoming an Avenger is Hank Goliath, for 2 reasons. One, he says it was only weeks ago that the Black Widow led Power Man and the Swordsman against us. That was back in 29. And I feel like there was more to it than that, but it's fair enough. And then the other objection he makes, which I think is interesting, is I don't want the Avengers to become a rest home for reformed supervillains. In other words, the Thunderbolts. So if we think about it right now, and who's a member, obviously Hank and Jan were never villains, but they're from the original lineup. But Captain America is that bridge between the original lineup and the new lineup. Everybody else was a villain. Hawkeye was a villain. Scarlet Witch was a vision. Quicksilver was a villain. Did I say vision? Villain. And Black Widow was a villain. So you're to the point now where you've got potentially four reformed villains becoming Avengers, and for whatever reason Hank doesn't like that, so they kind of do their traditional Avengers squabbling, and Wanda brings them up short and says, "You're here arguing while my brother's trapped, so that's not cool." So they get in there, what are we calling it, the sub well, let's see what they're calling the vehicle, the aero car. Okay, so they fly over to the Balkans, to Central Europe, it says here. Okay, Eastern Europe, Central Europe, whatever. Almost crash into the force field. They land, and Wanda says we can take these caves underneath the flying saucer and get under its force field that way. So they go in, and at this point, I was thinking, because I had no memory of this, I was thinking maybe this was the Supremor, the Supreme Intelligence of the Kree, but it's not. It's kind of a one-off type villain. It's this giant computer. And they go inside and confront it, and the computer talks to them and says the computer is also holding the Burgomeister of the village. Now this is an interesting point here, and I failed to mention this a couple of pages ago. I wanted to mention it. Let me just go back. Yeah, here. This is a kind of an important little moment in the history of Wanda and Pietro, which is that Quicksilver says, "Mr. Burgomeister, we shall never forget the kindness which you and your townspeople have shown us these past weeks." Now remember, where they originally came from, they were treated like freaks and driven out with pitchforks and torches. And so they go back and they're treated with kindness. And the Burgomeister says, "The honor was ours, my boy. Besides, how else could we repay you for that infamous day years ago when we denounced the two of you as demons and drove you from the valley?" So the Burgomeister is trying to make up, and he says, "How else could we repay you?" I think make up for is what he's really meaning. Repay means you did some. You're paying them back for something that they did, and you're not paying them back. You are making up for something you did. But again, you're trying to cram all those words in that little box, that little balloon, and Roy I don't think Roy got across what he was actually trying to say there, but it's close enough. But there's several important points raised here. One of them is this really the Burgomeister of this village? Or is he replaced later? Because that's a point. And why did they change their attitude toward Wanda and Pietro? Because they're back, it says, in our native village in the Balkans. So why would the people of this village be nice to them now? Maybe because they're Avengers? That's all I can think, is that because they've become Avengers, they're being treated nicer than they would have been, than they were, when they were just local people with strange powers. Being an Avenger or a member of the Fantastic Four has certain advantages over being an X-Man or just on your own, it seems like, in terms of prestige with the public and acceptance and all that kind of stuff. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's that they're Avengers. I don't know. But again, I also want to know, and we'll look at this as we go along, at what point does this character, the Burgomeister, change? Okay, we got to figure that out, because clearly here he's being a good guy. All right, so the Avengers are in that cave with the giant computer, and suddenly they realize that Wanda is also trapped along with Quicksilver. So that means the person that's been leading them around is not Wanda. She is some kind of alien robot thing in disguise. And she turns into this giant-headed golden creature with green and yellow costume and all that. And then here come the Ultroids, the strongest and most tireless of the many weapons of Ixar. So the big computer villain is called Ixar, and she's like his main servant or something. For I am but an android, as Captain America guessed, a mere invention of Ixar, created for the sole purpose of luring you into his trap. So that's the only reason she exists. Okay, so here come the Ultroids. Fight, 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 fight. Fight, 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 fight. Lots of interesting fighting here and not so interesting fighting. It's just not super fascinating to me. Oh, Lord, there's the pit monkey again. We can't get... I was really hoping that would be a fad that would only last a couple of issues. There's the darling pit monkey for $18.95. Wow. All right, so Goliath gets shot in the back. Jan tries to do something to the control panel and gets electrocuted, shocked, and she's passing out. Hawkeye is trapped. They tell him to surrender, but he doesn't. He gets caught in a net. Only Natasha, the Black Widow, is free because she's not an Avenger. So there's several interesting ways that Roy Thomas plays this. These creatures have been designed to fight the Avengers. Well, she's not an Avenger, so they don't fight her. But the female android that was Scarlet Witch, she realizes the Black Widow's there, and she may yet pose a threat to us, even though she's not truly an Avenger. Go seek her out and destroy her. Our victory is not complete. And so Black Widow comes and tries to rescue the Avengers, and she gets Steve out of there. And they've got Goliath in one of these tubes. I think they're going to siphon the powers of the Avengers off, something like that. And so now Ixar is getting upset that the Avengers are escaping. And at the very last couple of panels of this issue, they're trying to get through this tubing. Did it get down on them again or something? The art's not entirely clear here. Yeah, Cap says, stand back, Natasha. This is our one chance to crack those overgrown test tubes. She says, hurry. Even now I hear the pursuing Ultroids just around the corner. So Cap throws his shield. It cracks the tubing just a little bit. And then the Ultroids start shooting them with some kind of stun beams. And the last thing we see, Cap says we gave it all we had, but our best wasn't good enough. And if we end up in those glass cylinders of Ixar, it could be the end of the Avengers. Ixar says, your words are well chosen, even in utter abysmal defeat. Captain America, I love it. Even in utter abysmal defeat. For soon my artificial Ultroids shall each possess all the power of the Avengers themselves, power which you shall have lost forever, together with your lives. Next, the final clash. All right. I did not see anything of particular note in the back matter of this issue. I'm looking very quickly just to see if I missed anything. No, just a bunch of standard letters. All right, so let's go on to the second half and the conclusion of this story, which would be Avengers, I believe, 37. Here we go. I guess I've got to share it again. So sharing the screen. And here we go. Boom. All right. To Conquer a Colossus, Avengers 37. Not really much to say about this cover. I do like that they're continuing this theme of not having a bunch of dialogue on the cover. Man, these covers are so much better without a bunch of dialogue. I wonder if that's Roy Thomas. Was that his idea? Was Stan cramming all that dialogue on the cover? This is 2 in a row, and I can't remember about the previous ones that just had just the title. So let's go on into it. Again, well, you see Goliath trapped and everybody rushing to the attack. I don't like the way they show Quicksilver going fast back then, which is just lots of little speed lines and blurring his body out. That's not very effective to me. All right, to Conquer a Colossus. So Natasha and Steve, Black Widow and Captain America, have been knocked out. Same creative team this time, except Artie Simek on letters. And so they're putting Ultrana. So now we know the name of the female android leader that was created. She is Ultrana. That's cool. Now take them all to the ability assimilator, where their might shall be transferred to us. And one Ultroid has a really good question. He says, I do not understand what use the Earthlings can be to us. If we defeated them, what have we to gain by taking their powers? You know, Ultroid, whatever you are, that's a fine question. I give you credit for that. But another one says, but we overwhelm them by sheer weight of numbers and by separating them. Then each of us shall be equal to all the Avengers. Hey, that's the name of the show, all the Avengers. And our forces are legion. So in other words, they're going to try to turn them into basically super adaptoids, a whole army of super adaptoids. I'm here for that. Okay. So they start doing that. What of this female Earthling Ultrana? She is not truly an Avenger, and no special cylinder has been readied for her. Take her to Sector 5 to be disposed of later. It shall be done. What exactly power are they going to siphon from the Black Widow? That's, I mean, what power are they going to siphon from Hawkeye? I mean, you might get the growing and shrinking power from Hank. You can get Pietro's speed, Wanda's hex power, and I guess Steve's sort of super soldier physique, maybe. But these are not exactly, I'm not sure. It's a good question. Anyway, all right. And there's Jan in a little tiny cylinder. And now we're going to get Hawkeye asks, before you kill us, Ixar, could you give us your origin story? Well, sure. So there was some kind of an ancient war in space, and most of the people got killed, but the Ultroids were like the battle android creatures for the sides fighting. They were the only ones left. The last person, Ixar, this old man, and the only way he is saved is to have his mind put into the big computer. And then they fly around looking for planets to steal superheroes' powers. That all makes perfectly logical sense. And so they found Earth and they captured Wanda and Pietro, and then they're going to go out from there. So again, Roy Thomas has a clever idea. I like he paints around the edges of what we know and what's possible. And what I mean that here is, like, they weren't out looking for Natasha because she was not an Avenger technically. Okay, that's very clever. And then here, they don't know that Hank regained his power to shrink as well as grow. And so he is able to shrink down and escape. He frees Captain America, lifting the cylinder off of him. They fight. They free Hawkeye. He fights. And it's all going well and good. Quicksilver's out too, apparently. Jan's out too. All the Avengers are loose. And Ultrana says, even artificial creatures know when they are defeated. We are yours to command, Earthlings. Observe, we throw down our weapons. And Hank suspects a trap. And then Hawkeye says, I got my eye on him, basically. And they're reunited with Wanda and Pietro. And they realize that they haven't freed the Burgomeister, the head of that village where Wanda and Pietro were welcomed. And it's kind of a sad commentary to realize that the guy that welcomed them to the village, unlike when they were run out of the town for being freaks, is actually an alien computer mind pretending to be the Burgomeister. Because the mind, the big evil Ixar or whatever says, surrender or I'll electrocute this old man. And the Avengers are about to have to surrender, but then who I believe it's they're saying it's a stalemate, but then at some point here, somewhere in here, one of them says, okay, and again, this is Roy playing around the edges of what they can do, right? They can't harm the villain because they're the Avengers. They have a code, but Natasha's not an Avenger, so she's not restrained by that code. And so, all right, we fight the Ultroids. Ixar turns into a giant robot, and he fights them. And he fights them, and he fights them again. I'm going to move along on this. So we get this big action scene of Ixar, the giant android robot, fighting the Avengers. Wanda temporarily knocks him down, making him short circuit, but he has self-repairing circuits, so he gets back up and attacks her. And that just leaves Hawkeye and Black Widow. And Ixar says, "You dare challenge me? You are the weakest of them all." Hawkeye says, "You really know how to hurt a guy, don't you?" And Ixar says, "You have courage, Earthling, but you waste it in a useless gesture. I intended to seek you out last of all, but now I shall dispose of you and the female first." "Then stop yakking and start disposing, mister," says Hawkeye. But instead, Hawkeye points his bow and arrow at the Burgomeister, the old man, who says, "Why do you aim your weapon at me? I'm but a captive like your fellow Avengers." And Hawkeye says, "I think different, mister, and if you don't call off that walking pinball machine by the time I count 3, we'll find out who's right." Now, Wanda thinks he's crazy. "You speak as if the Burgomeister were Ixar himself." "That's exactly what I do think, lady." So the Burgomeister says, "I do not know how you fathom my secret, mortal." I don't know why he says mortal. Oh, I guess because he's an immortal robot, computer. But it will do you no good. If I die, you die as well. It would take but an instant for my giant Ultroid to aim a lethal ray blast at you. Well, then why hadn't he done that already? Hawkeye says, "That's the breaks of the Avenging game, Sunbeam." "Either way, I'd take you with me." So the Burgomeister realizes all this talk about the Avengers means he can't do it. He can't kill somebody. So Hawkeye has to back down and get ready to surrender. Excuse me. But then Black Widow points out she's not an Avenger and she'll blow his freaking head off. So he surrenders and he agrees to leave Earth alone. Excuse me. A little hot cough. He agrees to leave Earth alone, and the Avengers are freed. The flying saucer flies away. And so to kind of wrap things up, Wanda says, "Who would believe that a simple Burgomeister was a creature from another star?" And then the Avengers basically lie to the local people and say, "Oh, he died a hero. It's better this way." How could they understand that the man who governed them was replaced by a spying alien? So I guess he's gone. He's dead. See, again, it's not really clear when the swap happened. It must have happened after the Burgomeister welcomed Pietro and Wanda, because why would the alien computer mind know that those people had run them off from their village years ago? See what I mean? He had to have been the Burgomeister at some point, and now he's whatever, you know. Anyway, the aliens have promised that they shall never again come to our planet, and they fly away. And Hank says, "But you still haven't told us, Hawkeye, how you and Natasha got Ixar to surrender while we were unconscious." And Hawkeye, everybody's got secrets here. Hawkeye says, "Let's just say we appealed to his better nature, Hank." And he thinks, can't tell him how Tasha saved us, not if I want her to become an Avenger. So there's a lot of like lying and half truths going on here at the end. The Avengers lie to the townspeople, so they don't have to tell them that their Burgomeister was an alien computer creature. And then Hawkeye lies to the other Avengers so that they won't think less of Natasha threatening to kill. Again, this is echoed later. This is exact story beat is echoed by Jim Shooter later in Avengers 162 when Iron Man threatens Jocasta and makes Ultron retreat. And then Black Panther is not happy about that, says it was dishonorable, which is pretty true. All right, so Ixar flies away. He still looks like the Burgomeister, interestingly. I never thought I'd be saying the word Burgomeister so many times today. He flies away. He says, the Avengers have saved their world and undone a plan it took years to develop. Yet I feel no rancor towards them. For there are other worlds, other galaxies where I may discover weapons to use in my never-ending struggle. And if it takes me a lifetime, find them I shall. So I don't know if we ever see him again. I need to look that up, but I don't know that we ever see the Ultroids and Ixar again. And then meanwhile, the Avengers are thinking how it must be even lonelier for that guy than it's lonely for Captain America being, out of time. But the Avengers are reunited, and Wanda says, the Avengers reunited at last. Now what can possibly happen to mar our happiness? And Hank says, don't worry, lady. Fate will think of something. It always does. That's the truth. Next issue, Hercules. So that is interesting because I've always associated in my mind as Avengers, I've always associated Hercules and Black Widow. They were together as Avengers in a few issues later than this. And then they were also together in the Champions. So I always kind of associate Hercules and Black Widow together. And here Black Widow shows up in this story, and Hercules apparently is going to show up in the next one. I'm also curious, because I don't know this offhand, is this going to be the first appearance of the Marvel Hercules? Or had he been, surely he had appeared in Thor's comic before this. So we will find that out. We'll find out the answer to two questions on our next episode. I'll tell you if Ixar and the Ultroids ever appear again, and I will tell you if this is going to be the first appearance of Hercules. All right. I don't really see much of note. There's a pretty cool Thor cover coming up that month. But other than that, I'm going to leave off there. And next time we're going to look at Avengers. Let me go back. Let me get it right. 38 and maybe 39, maybe 40 even, who knows. All right. This has been all of the Avengers. I hope you enjoyed this one. This is a shorter episode than usual, but there wasn't a whole lot to that story. As I said, there's not a whole lot to really analyze or talk about it. It's not a villain we are really familiar with, kind of a one-off story in 2 episodes. And Hawkeye wasn't super annoying. I'm trying to think of all the stuff we usually get and analyze and discuss. There just really wasn't all that much. I am curious a few things about the Burgomeister. I don't think we're ever going to find them out. I think this issue is mainly noteworthy for laying the foundations for some later, better stories. In particular, the Yesterday Quest with Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing the Black Widow and Hercules together, maybe for the first time. So, all right, that'll do us for this time. We'll see you guys in our next episode. Don't forget to go to www.avengersassemble.net, avengersassemble.net. That's where you can find all episodes of this show, as well as a link to join the Patreon and help us out. All right, we'll see you guys next time.